He was no hero, just a farmer with calloused hands and shattered dreams. Until the day a stranger knocked on his door and handed him a scroll that could end the world or save it. In a kingdom swallowed by darkness, where even hope had turned to ash, one boy stood against the veil. But magic always comes with a price. This is the story of Alaron, the last spark, the last sword, the last hope, and his time starts now. The sun hung low on the horizon, casting a golden glow across the fields of Estivale. The village was small, nestled in a valley between two jagged mountain ranges, surrounded by thick forests and fertile land. It was the kind of place that felt as though time had forgotten it. A place where the seasons ruled, and the worries of the wider world seemed a distant echo. Alaron stood at the edge of the forest, his calloused hands pressed into the rich soil, feeling the pulse of the earth beneath him. He had always loved the land, the way it seemed to hum with life, the way the seasons turned in perfect harmony. There was a rhythm to the world here that he had always found comforting, like a heartbeat. Yet, tonight, something was different. As the sun dipped lower, the breeze picked up, carrying with it a strange, unsettling energy. Alaron could feel it in the air, the weight of something heavy pressing down on the village, something ancient and forgotten stirring in the darkness. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying with it a whisper that seemed to call his name. Alaron! Alaron! He turned sharply, his breath catching in his throat. But there was no one there. The village was silent, save for the soft murmur of leaves in the wind. He shook his head, convincing himself it was his imagination. After all, he had never been one to seek attention or adventure. He was just a farmer, a humble man who had spent his life tending to the land and serving his family. But even as he returned to his work, the feeling lingered, an undeniable sense that something was coming, something that would change everything. What if everything you thought you knew about yourself was a lie? What if you were destined for something far greater than you could ever imagine? That night, as Alaron sat in the small kitchen of his cottage, his thoughts kept drifting back to the strange feeling he had experienced earlier. He had tried to push it aside, but the unease gnawed at him. Outside, the wind howled, carrying with it the faintest trace of something ancient, something dark. A knock at the door broke his reverie. He stood, hesitating for a moment before opening it, his heart pounding in his chest. To his surprise, standing on the doorstep was a woman, tall, cloaked in midnight blue, her face shadowed beneath a hood. She radiated an aura of power, something beyond the ordinary. "You are Alaron of Estivale?" she asked, her voice calm but authoritative, like the wind before a storm. He nodded, unsure of who the stranger was or how she had known his name. "Yes, that's me. How can I help you?" The woman stepped forward, her presence intimidating. "The kingdom is in peril. A darkness stirs in the land, one that has been sealed away for centuries, and you, Alaron, are the last hope." Her words were heavy, their meaning settling in Alaron's chest like a stone. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm just a farmer." She handed him a scroll, old, worn, its edges frayed as though it had traveled across time itself. "The fate of the kingdom rests in your hands. You will come to understand soon enough." With that, she turned and disappeared into the night, leaving Alaron standing in the doorway, his mind spinning with confusion and doubt. The scroll trembled in his hands as he unrolled it, revealing ancient symbols and cryptic writings that made no sense to him. But one thing was clear. His life, the quiet existence he had always known, was about to change forever. "You have no idea what's coming, but you're the only one who can stop it. What would you do if the fate of the entire world rested in your hands?" The morning light filtered through the small window of his cottage, casting long shadows across the floor. Alaron sat at the table, the scroll spread out before him. He had spent the entire night trying to decipher the strange writing, but it was as though the words themselves were dancing just beyond his reach. The symbols seemed to shift, forming new meanings as he stared at them, mocking him. His thoughts were a swirl of confusion. What could he possibly have to do with saving a kingdom? He was just a simple man. He had never wielded a sword, never cast a spell, and never once considered himself anything more than a humble farmer. How could he possibly stand against an ancient evil? Alaron's mind kept returning to the woman, the mysterious figure who had come to him with such cryptic words. What did she mean by the last hope? What kind of power could she see in him that he couldn't see in himself? He thought of his mother, who had always kept him close, protective of him as if the world outside their cottage was too dangerous. When he spoke of leaving, she had been adamant in her protests. "Stay here," she had said. "The world is not as kind as you think. You don't need to go on some quest to risk your life for strangers. You are enough just as you are." But Alaron knew the time had come. His destiny was calling. Even if he didn't understand it, he had to answer. The feeling in his chest, the tug that had first led him to the forest, he could no longer ignore it. When the world calls you to greatness, do you step forward with fear, or do you rise above it? What if your moment of greatness was hidden behind your biggest fear? With a heavy heart, Alaron left his cottage that morning, not knowing what lay ahead but certain of one thing. He could no longer remain in the safety of the life he had known. He said his goodbyes to his mother, who kissed him on the forehead and whispered prayers for his safety. His heart broke as he watched her stand in the doorway, watching him disappear into the distance. The world beyond Estivale was vast and unknown to Alaron. He passed through forests dense with trees that seemed to whisper their own secrets, over rivers that stretched wide and deep. The air grew thicker the further he traveled, and he could feel the weight of something oppressive hanging over him. The land seemed to tremble beneath his feet, as though anticipating the coming storm. As he entered the first town beyond the mountains, he felt the eyes of the people upon him. Their faces were filled with fear, their eyes darting to the skies as though expecting something dreadful to fall upon them. Rumors were spreading, of dark forces moving through the land, of villages falling to creatures of shadow and flame. The people spoke in hushed tones, afraid to speak too loudly. Alaron listened, realizing the rumors were not just whispers. They were truths he had never wanted to acknowledge. The kingdom was on the brink of collapse, and he, a simple farmer, had been chosen to save it. The path you choose is never easy, but every step you take, you become closer to discovering the truth about your power. Are you willing to sacrifice everything for something bigger than yourself? After days of travel, Alaron arrived at the ancient city of Tarander, home to the lion, the mage who would train him. The city was vast, its towering spires casting long shadows across the cobbled streets. Merchants called out, selling exotic goods from distant lands. Alaron's senses were overwhelmed by the sheer scale of it all. He had never seen a place so full of life, of magic. But the lion was not like the other mages he had heard of in tales. His eyes were cold, his demeanor distant, as if he had seen too much of the world's darkness to be moved by anything. When Alaron approached him, asking for training, the lion did not smile. Instead, he looked at Alaron with contempt. "You wish to learn magic?" the lion asked, his voice grating, filled with scorn. "Do you think you can just pick up a sword and fight? Magic is not a plaything, boy. It is power, raw, untamed, and dangerous. You will fail more times than you succeed." Alaron stood tall, though his knees shook. He had come too far to turn back now. "I'm ready," he said, his voice steady despite the storm of doubt inside him. The lion simply nodded. "Then let's see if you can even summon a spark. You think you're ready? The truth is, the greater the power, the darker the cost. Are you willing to face your own limitations in order to unlock the strength within you?" Alaron stood stunned, still feeling the fading tremor of Thalian's spell that had knocked him back into reality. His fingertips buzzed from the raw magic he had just wielded, a surge so powerful it had cracked the floor beneath the rune circle. The tower, still trembling, groaned as dust and books settled around him. He looked at the lion, whose face bore a mixture of fear and admiration. "You are not meant to contain it, Alaron," the lion said, voice steady. "You must channel it, learn to bend it, let it guide you, but never let it consume you." The lion led him down the spiral staircase. The lower chambers were filled with artifacts, runes that hummed with ancient power, floating blades, bottled storms, and cracked hourglasses that seemed to defy time. There, Alaron met the order, a gathering of mages and warriors who had once stood against the veil. They bowed not to him, but to the scroll that had chosen him. He thought he was losing control, but what if the magic was finally listening? Each member of the order brought him a trial. The Knight of Flame challenged his courage. The Seer tested his resolve. The Shadowmancer forced him to confront his darkest fear, his father's disappearance, and the truth that maybe he had been taken by the veil. In the mirror hall he saw it, a memory twisted and unreal. His father, chained in shadows, whispering through the void, "You must finish what I could not." His training grew brutal. Days bled into nights. The pain, the doubt, the loss, all sharpened him. Until one night, the stars whispered in alignment. The time had come. Sometimes, the only way forward is through a memory you were never meant to see. The order brought Alaron to the gates of Hollow Flame, a ruined city resting on the threshold of the veil. Legend said no light could survive there. Yet, as he stepped forward, the scroll burned with celestial light in his chest. The air was thick, like breathing through oil. Whispers coiled in his ears. Creatures slithered between stone and smoke. Yet none touched him. Why? Because they feared what was coming with him. He wasn't walking into the darkness. The darkness was bracing for him. In the center of Hollow Flame, a twisted tree of bones stood, a beacon of the veil, pulsing with corruption, feeding off hope. Alaron unsheathed his sword. It shimmered with starlight. As he drove it into the ground, magic erupted. A ring of fire and frost shot out, forcing the shadows back. But something stirred beneath the beacon, a deeper, older thing. The Shadow King. He thought he was fighting monsters, but the real monster was waiting for him to believe he could win. The Shadow King emerged, cloaked in night, taller than towers, eyes like dying stars. He spoke Alaron's name with venom. "I remember your bloodline." Alaron's blade faltered. "You knew my father?" "I consumed him." Rage filled him, but rage wasn't enough. As they clashed, Alaron fell again and again, until he heard a voice, not Thalion's, but his father's. "You're not fighting to win, you're fighting to remember who you are. When your greatest weapon is your past, every wound becomes prophecy." The sword, once glowing, now pulsed with steady rhythm, like a heart. Alaron realized it wasn't just a weapon, it was part of the scroll, and the scroll, part of him. He rose. Light enveloped him. Not fire, not frost, but truth. The battlefield slowed. Every shadow paused. Every warrior of the order stared, because they saw not Alaron. They saw the last hope. They thought the hero was gone, but legends never end, they evolve. The final battle tore the sky. The veil cracked like glass. The order charged behind Alaron as he struck the Shadow King, not with power, but with memory. With light that echoed love, sacrifice, and truth, and the darkness couldn't bear it. The Shadow King screamed as light poured from his wounds. The beacon withered, and in a final cry, the veil shattered. Alaron collapsed, not in defeat but in peace. He didn't break the curse. He ended the era that fed it. Weeks passed. The world began to heal. Rivers cleared. Trees bloomed. Stars returned. The scroll vanished. Alaron returned to his village, not as a hero, but as a farmer. Hands still calloused, but eyes forever changed. Children gathered to hear his tale, and every time he ended it the same way. "I didn't save the world because I was special. I saved it because I couldn't let it end the way it began, in silence." Sometimes, the world doesn't need another king. It just needs someone who remembers the cost of peace. Late at night, Alaron heard the wind call his name. He turned toward the stars. The scroll had returned. A new shadow rises. He smiled, then let it. This is not just the end of a story. This is the beginning of a legacy. Would you rise if the world called you the last hope? Enjoyed this epic fantasy? Like this video if it stirred your soul. Subscribe for more cinematic stories like this. Comment what part gave you chills. Hit the bell so you never miss the next legend. Share this journey with a fellow fantasy fan. Your support brings these stories to life. Thanks for being part of the legend.